Noodler's Bad Belted Kingfisher is a blue fountain pen ink that is not only water resistant, it is also fade resistant when exposed to the sun and ultraviolet light. And in the rare event that you have some kind of supervillain trying to erase your writing with a laser beam, well, it's also designed to resist that as well. Now, the laser beam might be a little bit over the top, but Noodler's Bad Belted Kingfisher is widely regarded as one of the top anti-forgery and permanent fountain pen inks. The biggest question, though, is does it live up to the hype? In today's video, we are putting this ink to the test, both with regards to water resistance, and I'm going to be sharing the results of a 6-month-long experiment that I conducted to see how well this ink resists fading. Hey everyone, and welcome back. I am the Part-Time Economist, and in today's video, we're talking all about Noodler's Bad Belted Kingfisher. Now, for those of you who are in a hurry, you just want to see the results of the test, I will go ahead and put those timestamps so you can get to the most appropriate portion of the video. But if you're like me, you like talking about fountain pen inks, you like comparing, contrasting, knowing the history of them, so we're going to do that too. Again, if you're not interested, feel free to skip to the actual test. So let's talk about fountain pen inks. I love fountain pens. There are so many different kinds of inks, and it just feels so amazing to write and have these beautiful colored words on the page. However, I remember the first time I got the slightest little bit of moisture on my fountain pen ink. Those words were gone. They were smeared beyond all recognition, and that is a common shortcoming of most, I would say, fountain pen inks, is that as soon as they get a little bit of wetness on them, they are done. Now, you're probably thinking, this isn't a big problem. How often do I throw my letters out in the rain? How often do I hold my homework under a running faucet full of water? But when I say fountain pen inks don't like water, I'm not talking about these extreme scenarios. I'm talking literally you have a glass of water with condensation on it. You touch that glass and then touch your page, your ink is going to smear. So we need something that is water resistant. And there were a variety of water resistant fountain pen inks that came out, but kind of the gold standard became Noodler's black ink. Now, Noodler's black ink was really, really good and still is kind of the, like I said, gold standard. It resists water, it resists fading, even stuff like bleach on the page can't get it off. So for the vast majority of people, something like Noodler's black ink is gonna protect their writing at least as well as writing with a traditional pen. However, the Noodler's black ink kind of became famous for being bulletproof, that nothing could take it off the page. And it actually became a really strong selling point from a marketing perspective for the company. So they came up with a competition, basically trying to pay people to see if they could remove it from the page. Well, wouldn't you know it, one engineer found a way to remove the ink from the page using a laser. Now, most of us would say, when is that going to happen in real life? Let's not even worry about it. Not Noodler's ink. Noodler's ink said, we're going to design an ink that you cannot remove from the page, even if you have access to a laser. Again, not that most of us would need it, but that led to the creation of the Noodler's Warden series. You will recognize these inks by the bad name in the title. So there's Noodler's Bad Belted Kingfisher, which we are reviewing today. There is Noodler's Bad Green Gator. There is Bad Black Moccasin, Bad Blue Heron, and then there's also a brown, I think, but I don't know the name. All the Bad series inks, all the Warden series, they have the same characteristics. They just come in different colors. So anything that I'm saying today for Bad Belted Kingfisher also applies to these other inks as well. So with that being said, I know you all are here for the tests, so let's get into it. The first one that we're going to be doing is the water resistance test. So I'm going to go ahead and roll that clip. Alright, so the first thing we're doing is we're going to set up basically a control, and we're using the Noodler's Black Eel, which is just a standard waterproof black ink. Now, what you're going to notice about it does not get affected by the water at all. Up top, we have Private Reserve, and this is the electric DC blue, I believe. And that's just, again, another control showing what happens to your standard, normal, non-waterproof fountain pen ink. And then, of course, the bottom we have the Bad Belted Kingfisher. It does take a little bit of time for the water resistance to set in, so we're going to start this experiment about 12:12, and then about 14 minutes later, we will come back again, just getting a little bit of water on the page. What you'll notice is that the Noodler's Black Eel, like I said, virtually completely unaffected. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually run this underneath some water. Again, is it likely that you would run a page underneath water? No, but even if you were to just dab some water on it and let it sit there for a while, you would have more or less the same effect. By this point, you can see that, again, Noodler's Eel, no running, no smearing. Private Reserve at the top is basically, you can't even make out what it says. And then Bad Belted Kingfisher at the bottom, you'll notice kind of a dual effect. The underlying black, I think that the ink is formulated with kind of a black base and then a dye layered on top of it, because you'll still be able to see the underlying words. I can still make out Kingfisher, but the blue, the edges of it are definitely smearing. So takeaway here, if you don't want any kind of smearing at all, my opinion is you're better off with the standard black. If you're okay with smearing, but you can still see the underlying Kingfisher there, you can definitely use that. Alrighty, so now that we have done the water resistance test, that's something that you can do in just a couple minutes, but what I really want to show you is this fading resistance test. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the screen a piece of paper. This is a picture that I took back in July. What I did is I used Noodler's Bad Belted Kingfisher, and I just wrote basically my grocery list, and then underneath it I wrote again my grocery list, but using a cheap Dollar Tree ballpoint pen, right? So you can see here at the time of writing, both of them were really nice, really clear. What I did is I left this piece of paper on my car seat facing the sun for 6 months. So 6 months of UV light coming in. You can actually see where the page is a little bit discolored. It's kind of faded from white to kind of a yellow color. So even with the page fading after being exposed to that UV light, you can see clearly the Bad Belted Kingfisher ink. It's still there. It's still doing well. However, the ballpoint pen ink is basically completely gone. The only way you can even tell that it's there is from the indentation on the page. So at least in both of my tests, it appears the Bad Belted Kingfisher ink lives up to some of the qualities that it is described to have. So let's get into the conclusion and summary. When would you want to use this ink, and when would you not want to use this ink? Well, in my opinion, you would want to use this ink any time that you want some kind of permanence on the paper. Now, that's kind of the starting point. Then you have to ask yourself an additional question. Do you need color or do you not need color on the page? Because if you don't need a colored ink, this is just my personal opinion, if you don't need a colored ink, I would prefer to use something like Noodler's Black or Noodler's Eel Black, because when you're using those, if you get a little bit of water on the page, it's not going to smear as much as with the Bad Belted Kingfisher. If you remember from some of our tests, the Bad Belted Kingfisher, the black undertones stayed there, but some of that blue, the coloring, it kind of washed off. So if you don't want any kind of smear whatsoever, I would go with the Noodler's Black, the Noodler's Black Eel, something like that. If you're using a color and you don't expect the page to get wet, so you want color, then the Bad Belted Kingfisher or any of the Warden series could be a really good choice, because you're going to have that color. It's going to look really pretty, but in the event that there does get some water on the page, you're still going to have that underlying black so that you can tell what's going on there. So just a few more thoughts before I close out this video. I actually had this bottle of Noodler's ink for almost a decade now, and you can see I've hardly even used any of it. That's one thing I really do love about the Noodler's brand. They really do give you a fantastic value for your money. I think when I got this bottle, it was like $12.50 for the entire bottle. I think now they're getting closer to $20, but they literally fill them to the top. So if you do decide to order Noodler's ink after watching this video, be aware that when you open it, be very careful because it's going to be right at the top. So overall, Noodler's, in my opinion, it's a brand that has some really cool products, a lot of characteristics that simply don't exist with other fountain pen inks. And if I'm doing something where I want a little bit of color and then I also want some permanent features to the writing, Bad Belted Kingfisher, at least for me, is a pretty good choice. Of course, I always want to know what fountain pen inks you like. If there are any other permanent fountain pen inks that you really like, I'm specifically interested in those. So if there's another lineup, another series that's permanent but also has some color to it, be sure to let me know. As always, I do appreciate you watching, and I will see you next time.